Welcome to the Hardcore MBA podcast with your host, Erlend, Bakke.
Hello and welcome to Hardcore MBA. Today we are all about podcasting, how to improve a podcast, start a podcast, launch a podcast. And to figure out about that, we are talking to Cliff Ravenscraft. He's been podcasting since 2005, and at some point he loved it so much that he quit his job and did it full time. He's been doing it full time for many years now. We were just talking about how he was traveling Europe not long ago. Hi Cliff, where are you signing in from?
I'm coming in from northern Kentucky in the United States, just outside of Cincinnati, Ohio.
Fantastic. And you've already been up for hours and hours and working away on your business?
Absolutely, man. I wake up at 5 a.m. every morning, can't wait to start my day.
But then you go to bed at 9 probably.
I usually go to bed around 11:30 in the evening.
Wow,
you only need about 5.5 hours of sleep, so it's all good.
5.5 hours of sleep?
Yep.
Okay. Well, we've just had a cat staying here, and that cat kept us awake all the time. So I'm definitely one of these people that needs about 7 to 8 hours sleep consistently on a nightly basis. So that the cat was constantly interrupting our sleep every sort of 4 hours and then every hour, and so I was feeling quite sleep deprived. But you were saying you only sleep 5.5 hours.
I sleep 5.5 hours, and I usually take a nap for about 30 minutes somewhere within the day. So
there you see, that's the smart thing to do. Are
Yep.
you half Spanish or something?
No.
That's why you do your siesta.
No, I just do it because, it just kind of refreshes me in the middle of the day whenever I just kind of like, you know what, I feeling a little bit of lag. So I lay down for about 30 minutes and get right back up, and I feel completely refreshed.
Well, I think in the olden days, that's what people used to do, like all over the place. There would be an afternoon nap, and it would be normal. But now we don't do that.
I find it's a lot easier to do all of this stuff. One thing, I don't know if you know this about me at all, Erlend, but about 19 months ago, I weighed 100 pounds more than what I do now.
Wow.
And so about 19 months ago, I made a decision I was going to work out 6 days a week, every week for the rest of my life. And so I spend anywhere between an hour to 3 hours a day working out. So that gives me more energy than you can possibly imagine.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I'm doing that myself. I rotate between sort of gym classes, yoga, and tennis. I used to do martial arts, don't do that so much anymore. But yeah, staying active is amazing, especially if you do it early in the morning.
Well, I do mine in the evening, believe it or not.
Really?
I hear a lot of people say, if I don't work out in the morning, it's never going to happen. And my response to that is, when you first start out, that could be true because when you first start out, there's all this willpower that's involved. And if you look at the latest studies on willpower is like a muscle that once used, it actually wears out and it has to recover. And what happens is every single time you make a decision to do something, all day long, you are using your willpower. And that's why I don't know if you've ever known anybody. I know that I've certainly experienced this. I don't know if you have, but when it comes to like trying to control the healthy eating habits and stuff like that, it just seems like in the evening you have less willpower to say no to the bad stuff you should avoid. And that's because your willpower, your decision-making ability, it is weak. It's been, it's that muscle, if you will, that it's kind of been depleted. It's been burned out. And so it actually has to rest. And when you wake up in the morning, you wake up with a newly refreshed set of decision-making ability, or this willpower. So when you first start out, working out in the morning certainly is an easier decision to make because you have more willpower to do it. But if you do it for 90 days, after 90 days, working out becomes a habit, and it's no longer something that it needs willpower to do anymore. And after 90 days, I will tell you that if you say to yourself that if I don't work out in the morning, I won't work out at all, it's just a story and a lie that you're telling yourself that you believe that's just not true.
Well, I tend to find that it gives a real sort of energy boost in the morning. And it's, so you get up at 6, you go to gym at 7, and then, when you go to work, you've already gotten all these things done. I think it depends on what you need.
Yeah, it depends on what everybody wants, and you're certainly right. You get the endorphins kicking, and boy, man, you get up at 6, you hit the gym at 7, and you come in and you take a shower, you get dressed, you work. You definitely have that energy. You have a more positive mindset and focus and stuff like that. So there's certainly that going for you. Now, for me, I work out at 8 p.m. every night. So I go to the gym in the evening, and that's when I get and of course, I think of the gym as being therapeutic. It's where I go to blow off stress or anxiety or anything else. It's like, man, it's been a really long day. And I'll tell you what, I go to the gym, and I have one T-shirt that I designed for myself. It says, failure is not an option, it's a requirement. And for anybody out there that's into strength training, you know exactly what that means. I actually push myself to the point where my muscles completely break down and they are absolutely fail. I mean, I do a post-workout selfie, and after chest and tricep day, I can just barely hold my phone up because I've completely burned out my muscles. And the exciting thing is that completely wipes me out. And I'll tell you what, when I'm sleeping for 5 or 5.5 hours, I am dead asleep. I'm dead to the world. And the thing is, I get up at 5 o'clock in the morning, and for me, I never schedule anything before 10 a.m. in my business. Nothing goes on my calendar before 10 a.m. And so I have 5 hours of productivity to do anything I want. And I spend most of those hours actually reading and growing and doing things that expand my mindset, so that I have more to contribute to others throughout my day. And I just can't imagine, pulling myself away in the morning, traveling 30 minutes to the gym, spending 90 minutes at the gym, and then coming home and showering, and then all of a sudden jumping right into my workday. It's like, man, that takes away all of that morning productivity, all that growth and stuff. And so I don't feel like I have as much to contribute to the world if I don't spend that time in the morning doing all those other things. So it's funny because there's no one right way to do anything, and all of this stuff is just possibilities.
It's whatever works, right?
Yes.
So tell us about how you got started in podcasting in 2005.
Sure. So I've always been into technology. When I was a kid, I took my first computer apart when I was 8 years old. I actually was a Commodore VIC-20. Taught myself how to learn how to do basic programming. In 1996, they introduced. I was introduced to the visual web. I was already on bulletin board services and doing text-based connectivity, computer networking. But when they came out with HTML, and I taught myself how to do HTML, I came out with, I was among the first of the web loggers, which was what we were known as before we were called bloggers. And so I've always been into this technology stuff. And back in middle of 2005, I heard about this thing called podcasting. And it was all about where you could take an audio recording and you could put it into your blog RSS feed. And anybody who is subscribed to your RSS feed for your blog, they could automatically have this audio file delivered to them. And it's like, wow. And so I started to check into this, and I found a couple technology podcasts that I could listen to. And I'm like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. This is like talk radio, but where it's delivered to me. It's like talk radio where, wait a second, I'm not into sports. I don't really want to hear too much about politics. And I'm not into the news of the day because those people are so negative. And if you listen to the news every day, you feel like we live on the worst. I don't know how more people don't commit suicide listening to the news every day. So here's the situation. I like some talk radio because I like to think, I like to hear new ideas, but I didn't like what was on the radio. And when I found something that I did like, I hated the fact that, I had to be in the car when it was on. If I'm driving to go see a client, for example, they've been teasing for the last 2 hours, we're going to talk about this topic. And I'm like, okay, it's the only thing I want to hear you talk about today. And finally, I get to my client's office, and you're just now going to return from the break, and you've been teasing it for 2 hours, and now I have to get out of the car. And there's no recording of this. I can't go back and get it. I can't even buy it from you. But with an audio podcast, it's like, wow. Number one, I get to choose what I listen to. Number two, if there's commercials, I can fast forward through them. Number three, not only am I choosing what I get to listen to, but I choose when I get to listen to it. It's on my schedule. And if I actually decide I want to listen to it in the car, which is an option to me. When I get to a client's office, I can hit pause, and as soon as I'm finished, I'm driving back to my office, I can hit play again and listen to the rest of it. And not only that, but I can listen to it on an airplane. I can listen to it, anywhere I want to go because I can download it and take it with me. And so I was so excited about podcasting.
But in 2005, it wasn't like that. I mean, you didn't have iPhones, you didn't have the podcast app. 2005, you had to go to a blog, right?
Actually, in 2005, we had iPods, we had Zen, the Microsoft Zune player.
Yeah.
We had the Rio devices. So we had all kinds of portable MP3 playing devices. We didn't have cell phone. We didn't have the modern smartphones that we have now with apps on them. But we all had all of the tech enthusiasts, the early adopters, and I happen to be an early adopter of technology. So I had plenty of these mobile media portable MP3 playing devices. And so what you had to do is had software on your computer that would automatically download these. And so instead of the app on your phone automatically downloading it, there was software on your computer that did this. You didn't have to go to the site or anything like that. It would automatically download it, and then you connect a cable. I don't know if some people remember these things called cables that you actually connect to your computer. But you would connect your MP3 device to it, and then you would drag and drop those MP3s over to your MP3 playing device. And then eventually we did come around to, and it was just, I think it was only like late 2006 when we started getting some decent smartphones. There were smartphones before the iPhone. It wasn't the first smartphone. So there was some syncing ability early on in late 2005, early 2006. But yeah, so what happened for me is I'm listening. I'm a consumer of podcasts, and then I'm watching a TV show with my wife. My wife had been watching this TV show, Lost. Have you ever heard of it?
Yeah.
Okay. So she's watching the show. I can't understand why she's into it. People tell me it's a scripted version of this show called Survivor. And I'm like, I've never watched Survivor, and I can't imagine watching one that's scripted. And it just seems uninteresting and unappealing to me. And then I think it was like the fourth to last episode of the first season. I sit down on the couch while she's watching it with my laptop, and all of a sudden, there's this guy in a boat and this team of people on a raft trying to escape an island, and this guy's got this real country voice, and he says, "We're gonna have to take the boy." And then on the other side of the island, there's this underground hatch that they've uncovered, and there's this light that emanates from it, and there's this mystery, and I'm like, I'm hooked. And so I start researching the show, and I find that there's this online community. There are millions of people around the world addicted to the TV show Lost. And the thing is it's not even broadcast anywhere outside of the United States, but millions of people around the world are illegally downloading this show so that they can watch it because there's this entire internet phenomenon. It's one of the first times that writers of a television show actually created an official online forum, and it was called the Fuselage. So the producers, Damon Lindelof and Carlton Cuse, created an official forum, online forum, for the writers of the show, the actors of the show, and literally hundreds of thousands of subscribers to this forum got in there and engaged with the writers. The writers also did some incredible things in this TV show that they put hidden clues in the background. So if you were a casual viewer, you could enjoy the show. But if you were more than a casual viewer, they would give you hints in the forum that if you look closely in the background of this one scene, watch it again, and you'll notice a little something in the background you might have missed. And so we all go back, and we had DVRs back then, and HD was just coming out. And so people would actually do screen captures of every frame of every episode and post them online. And then we would actually go in and zoom in, and you see there's a book on a bed in the background. This guy got up off of his bed, and on the cot, there's a book, and it's open with the cover, with the spine showing up. And if you zoom in HD, you could see the name of that book. And then you go into Amazon, you read the summary of that book, and all of a sudden it gives you a hidden clue as to what might be going on in the mystery of the show. Crazy, silly little things like that, but it connected all these people around the world, and I got addicted to the show. And so I'm thinking, I love podcasts. I wonder if there's a podcast out there about the TV show Lost. There were 5 podcasts devoted to the TV show Lost. And I subscribed to all 5 of them and listened to every episode of all 5 shows every single week. And I started blogging about it on my blog. And one week I called in, I recorded an audio MP3 file and submitted an audio feedback for one of these 5 shows, sharing a theory that I had just blogged about. They played it on their show, and now this show had like 70,000 subscribers to it. And so I'm like, I hear my voice on their podcast, and all of a sudden I feel like this little kid. Now, Erlend, I don't know if you've ever had this when you were a kid, but man, when I was a kid, you could call the radio station and request them to play a song. And they would actually record your voice as you're requesting it. And they said, okay, we'll get this on. And actually, it would be tape delayed. So in a few minutes, they would actually play your voice on the radio requesting the song, and then they would play the song. Did they ever do that for you?
Yeah. I think they still do that, actually, yeah.
So they probably even still do it. So I remember as a kid, I would like, oh my gosh, I'd be calling all my friends, you guys got to tune in right now. You're going to hear my voice. I got on the radio. And so I had that same feeling when I heard my own voice in a podcast. And to know that this is going out to 70,000 other people. Well, let's just say this, Erlend. My blog traffic went through the roof. I had been blogging for more than 10 years, and all of a sudden, my blog traffic went through the roof. There's an organization called Entertainment Weekly, EW.com. They actually heard my voice feedback, checked out my blog post, and wrote an article on their website as a result of my 3.5-minute audio clip on that podcast. And all these people said, Cliff, I listened to you on the podcast. You should do your own podcast. And well, it didn't take a lot to stroke my ego. And so I said, okay, I'll create my own podcast. And so I created a podcast devoted to the TV show Lost. Asked my wife, Stephanie, if she wanted to join me. She said yes. And 2 unknown human beings from Northern Kentucky sitting in their basement with no more than $35 of investment in equipment all of a sudden created a podcast devoted to the TV show Lost. And by our 3rd episode, we had 16,000 subscribers. And after 2.5 years, that built to over 65,000 subscribers.
Wow! So how many listeners did you have to the Lost series at the time?
So the Lost podcast had 16,000 subscribers by the 3rd episode. Which, by the way, this is not typical numbers for podcasts. This is in the early days. People were desperate to find content for podcasts, and there were millions of fans of the TV show around the world. So we hit, and not only that, but there was another thing. iTunes had just added podcasting to iTunes, and iTunes had also just at the very same time, they had just started to release TV episodes where you could buy them for $1.99 the day after it aired on television. And so people were searching for Lost to find the TV show that they could buy, and it said TV show or TV episodes. And then right below it, it said podcasts, free. And our podcast was right next to the official Lost podcast. And so we immediately had this massive audience. And by the way, it went to my head. It was horrible. I mean, if you go and look at the podcast reviews for the Lost podcast with Cliff and Stephanie, there's so many 1-star reviews, and every single one of those 1-star reviews well-deserved, because it went to my head in a big way. But we had fun. We had an amazing time, and I haven't been there in a long time, but let's just go. If I go to lostpodcast.com.
So it's still up there. You still...
Yeah, 261 episodes is what we did.
Okay.
And by the way, each of those episodes are at least an hour. So that's 261 hours of me and my wife talking with people around the world about the TV show Lost.
Wow. So it sounds like you hit a good wave, that there were all these things happening. Lost was popular, iTunes did some changes, and you were able to surf that wave of momentum when you launched that podcast.
That's how I got started.
So in terms of podcast downloads, like globally in 2005, how many approximately were there?
Well, by the 3rd episode, there were 16,000.
But I'm talking globally. Do you know the stats? Or?
Oh yeah, nobody knows those. Any independent podcaster only ever knows about their own stats.
Right.
Right. So there's no way to know that, because there are some companies out there that will, like Libsyn has, maybe 100,000 podcasters, and they can tell you the stats for them. But Libsyn didn't exist, and I don't think they existed in 2005. I think they came around 2006.
Okay.
And even then, the number of podcasters that they independently hosted, nobody's ever owned this space. I'd say that the only company that could really give you some statistics is iTunes or Apple, and they never release anything like that.
So what about growth the last sort of 10 years? Because there has been, especially the last sort of 3 to 4 years, there's been a massive increase in podcasting.
There's the perception that there's been a massive increase in podcasting, but it certainly has gone more mainstream. So here's what I can tell you is when we first started out, I was probably among one of the first 150 to 200 podcasters in the world. So back when I started in 2005, there was not a ton of podcasts out there. And that's why I said you have literally hundreds of thousands of technology early adopters, and they all discovered podcasting just like I did. They were all just as eager. And boy, if you create a podcast, you instantly had an audience out there. So I would say in 2006, there was it got to the place where there maybe were, by the end of 2006, there probably was a few hundred to maybe even over 1,000 podcasts that existed at that time. And then it started to grow really rapidly. But there's been this gradual increase to where today I can tell you there's just over 275,000 audio podcasts. Which, if you think about this, podcasting is still the single greatest platform that's available to help you get noticed in a very noisy world. So when you think about blogging, and I'm still a blogger. I started out as a blogger, and I still believe a blog is a valuable platform for getting the attention of people, and it's great for SEO and search engine traffic and all that other stuff. I believe every audio podcaster should be a blogger as well. However, when it comes to blogs, there are over 450 million active English language blogs. We're not even counting all the ones that are inactive, but just a 450 million active English language blogs. And so if you were to look for a blog on the TV show Lost at the time, there were already thousands upon thousands of those. But when I created a podcast, there was only 5, and I was the 6th. And it actually didn't take me too long to become up there ranked in the top 1, 2, and 3 of those podcasts. So the same is true today. Now, of course, you hear today a lot of people saying, well, video is the next big thing. Live video is even bigger than the next big thing, and YouTube this, Facebook Live that. Well, here's what I can tell you about YouTube. When it comes to your message and your thoughts and your content being consumed or noticed by people, when you think of that as your needle in a haystack, well, okay, we already talked about the big haystack of 450 million active English language blogs. How about the fact that YouTube right now, within this 1 hour of this, let's just assume we talk for an hour. But if we were to talk for 1 hour during this podcast, 150 hours of new content will be uploaded to YouTube. Actually, wait a second, that's wrong. I think it's 150 hours of new content uploaded every minute. I'm going to go to youtube.com/stats. I know it's absolutely, it is ridiculous, the number of stuff that's up there. I can't find it right now, but it might actually be 150 hours of new content uploaded every minute on YouTube.
Right.
I think the last time I remember it was
cat videos.
It was like 4 billion hours of new video, or I think it's 1.5 billion hours of new video every month on there.
Yeah, and
so
50% are cat videos.
Maybe, but the reality is that there's a lot. No matter what your topic is, I don't know about you. Whenever I'm searching for something like, I bought a charcoal grill a couple years ago, and I'm like, how can I start a charcoal grill without using lighter fluid? And I know there are people out there that do this. I want to learn how to do it because I hate the taste of charcoal fluid, and I want to get rid of my gas grill. So I go into YouTube and I search it, and what do I find? 75,000 videos on how to do this. All right, it's just, what's the chances I'm going to check out any more than one of those? If one of them has the answers, that's all I need. And the other 74,999, I could care less.
Yeah.
All right. So when I create a podcast, I'm creating a podcast. And there's 275,000 other podcasts out there. But man, you compare that to the 1.5 billion hours of video content, the 450 million other English language blogs out there that are active. 275,000 is still a minuscule number. If you think about it, podcasting is still in its toddler stage. I think we've just outgrown the infancy stage, and the podcasting as an industry is just now getting to that place where it's taking its first steps.
And why is that? Why are people, is it just convenience that it's easy to sit down and sort of write something?
Yeah. So in 2005, it was extremely difficult to consume a podcast, let alone create one.
Yeah.
So for somebody to consume a podcast in 2005, you had to know, number one, had to know what an RSS feed was. Number two, you had to know what to do with it. You had to find software that you could run on your computer. And that software, by the way, was not intuitive. And then once you had it on your computer, you either had to listen to it on your computer or you had to know how to get it from that software through a cable onto your portable media player. And then, depending on what portable media player you had to figure out how to actually find that on that little flash drive or even physical hard drive still at the time. And you had to figure out how to get it there so you can listen to it on the go. And it was very difficult. So the reason why that was the infancy stage, and then all of a sudden the smartphone did come out, and then all of a sudden it was easier to sync things over with iTunes and some other smartphones as well, and that made it a little bit easier. And then all of a sudden these phones started getting high-speed internet access, and when we started to get 3G internet connections, it was the very first time that you actually didn't even need a computer to get a podcast. Now you could actually get the podcast directly from the browser on your phone, and you could download it from an app on your phone over 3G. And then we went to 4G and LTE, and today, I mean, we can listen to a podcast within seconds of it being available, and it's right there on your phone. And in fact, the interesting thing, what makes it so easy today and why it's spreading faster and faster today is I've had this happen a number of times. I sit down on a plane next to a complete stranger, and we get to talking, and this happens every single time. They say, so where are you heading to? And I said, I'm heading to a conference to speak. And he's like, oh, really? What kind of conference? What's a podcasting conference? What are you talking about? And I'm going to talk about the benefits of podcasting for your business. Well, tell me more. And so we're literally sitting down. We just sat down, and you have to turn your phone off by the time they close the door on the airplane, that legally anyway. You have to turn your phone off and put it in airplane mode. Or you don't have to turn your phone off anymore. You still have to put it in airplane mode as they close the cabin door. But from the time I sit down, from the time we put our luggage up, from the time all of that, before they close the cabin door, this is what I'm able to do. I'm able to say, I'm Cliff Ravenscraft. I'm going to a conference. I'm speaking. He says, tell me more. Or she says, tell me more. I say, do you have a smartphone? Yeah. Doesn't matter if it's a Windows phone. Doesn't matter if it's a BlackBerry. Doesn't matter if it's an Android. Doesn't matter if it's an iPhone. Any one of them will do. They hand me their phone. I say, here, let's pull up your app store. Boom, right here. And by the way, if it's an Android, if it's an iPhone, it already has the app built in. We don't even have to go download the app. And then I show them how to search for a topic. And I say, search for podcasting. And then they search it and say, now, see my podcast right there? Click the subscribe button. It's absolutely free. And they're like, it's free? Yeah, it's free. And then I click play. I say, click play. And they play it. And it's like, oh, wow, that's amazing. We actually subscribe them to 2 or 3 podcasts that are interests for them. And I say, now, every time that producer of that show releases a new episode, you'll get a notification on your phone, and automatically it will be available for you. And all of that happened within 5 minutes of sitting down next to that person.
And now it's getting integrated into all the cars as well, right? With Apple Play and everything like that.
Yeah, Apple CarPlay is a piece of junk. And by the way, I'm an Apple snob. I'm a huge Apple fanboy. But CarPlay is such a piece of junk. But you know what? Podcasting has been incorporated in cars ever since cars had Bluetooth installed. So we've had podcasts in our car ever since we've had smartphones with podcasts on them and Bluetooth connectivity. And even before that, as soon as we had podcasting in cars before there was Bluetooth, because we had cassette adapters that plugged into the 1/8 inch jack on your headphone jack on your MP3 player. So yeah, but you're right. I'd say in another 2 or 3 years, every single car you're going to purchase is going to have apps built in. Whether or not they'll all have podcasting apps, I don't know. But obviously, the Apple CarPlay does have the podcast app built into it. So yeah, technically speaking, it is going to be there. It's just not. I personally, I just don't like CarPlay or Android CarPlay.
Well, it seems that all car manufacturers can't seem to create a good control, except Tesla. I guess Tesla's got a good panel.
Tesla has amazing. I tell you what, Tesla's the car of the future.
Yeah, totally. And the Model 3 is basically the new T Ford. That's what I've heard.
Yeah. We're living in incredible days, and I look forward to just. I cannot wait until 10. Well, actually, I can, because I'm going to get older, and I'll be 53 years old in 10 years from now. So I'm not rushing it, but boy, in 10 years from now, the world. I think about the world we lived in 10 years ago. What I do today for a living wouldn't even be possible 10 years ago. The money that I generate, the lifestyle I live, it just wouldn't even be possible 10 years ago. And so to think about all the things that have made what I'm doing today possible over the course of the past 10 years, and knowing how the growth of technology is exponential, it's incredible. Yeah, I'm looking forward to my contact lens. I'm looking forward to having watching YouTube videos for my contact lenses in 10 years from now. You laugh, but you come back 10 years from now and play this episode, and it's like, oh my gosh, he's right. There are people. Here's what you want to hear. Mind blown. There are people right now, right at this very second, they're watching this 10 years in the future. He's like, oh my gosh, he's right. How did he know this? You're out there. There's one person right now, 10 years from now, in 2026, watching this video from the archives, and he's like, this guy knew what he was talking about. I'm watching him on my contact lenses.
Are you seeing an increase in downloads all over the world? I mean, are you seeing like downloads from Bangladesh and India and things like that happening?
I saw those in 2005. Okay. Yeah. Let me just tell you, again, you're talking to a guy in northern Kentucky, which I know you're not from the United States. So we're talking about I'm in the middle of nowhere. All right. The opportunity 15 years ago for anybody to know the name Cliff Ravenscraft outside of his blog was few and far between. Today, there are over 1.5 million people in the world. If you bring up the word podcasting in a conversation, there are 1.5 million people in this world that will instantly bring my name into the conversation. That's the power of podcasting today. Now, when I created that Lost podcast, within the third week of the show, I had people calling in with feedback from Hong Kong, from Sri Lanka, from Dubai, from I'm trying to think of all Kuwait, Qatar. I mean, all over the globe. I mean, places I'd never heard of before. Within 3 weeks, everywhere in the world listens to podcasts.
So how do you see podcasting progressing from 2016 and onwards? What are we going to see more of?
Well, I think you're going to see more people getting involved in creating content. So here's what I can say is that, I mean, in the past 10 years, or actually it's been 11 years now, going almost 12, we've gone from a couple hundred podcasts to 275,000. I would expect the number of podcasters to double within the next 5 years. So I see a massive adoption of people creating content because they see that there are so few competing podcasts out there. And when I say this, let's just take self-help, business productivity, entrepreneurial type podcasts, right? It's one of the most popular podcasts out there, or genres of podcasts, or technology podcasts, all right? So if you were to create a technology podcast or a entrepreneurial focused podcast, either one of those two, if you create a podcast, you're going to be creating a podcast that's going to be competing with, let's just say, maybe 1,000 or 2,000 other podcasts in the same genre. All right. But if you create a blog on one of those two topics, you're actually competing against hundreds of thousands of other blogs. You're competing against hundreds of thousands of other content creators on YouTube and video and all those other places. Whereas hundreds, you can actually, if you create great content and you have a unique message and you stand out in some unique way and you have some offering, even with hundreds of other podcasts in your niche, you can stand out and you can gain an audience of hundreds immediately, and eventually thousands, and potentially even tens of thousands over the course of a period of time. And the interesting thing about a podcast listener, this is something we haven't talked about. The fact is that when I create a blog, when I create video content, the average person who's going to consume a blog or written or video content, they're going to give you about 3 minutes of their time on average, maybe 10. But usually about 3 minutes is about the attention span that the average blog reader or video watcher will give you. Are there exceptions to that? Absolutely. Have I ever sat down and watched a 90-minute video on YouTube? Yeah. All right. Are some people actually still watching this on YouTube? Yeah. Okay. But is this average? Not at all. Now, when it comes to an audio podcast is unique, which, by the way, I believe an audio podcast blows the video podcast out of the water every single day of the week. And the reason why is because no screen time required. And that means people don't have to actually look at their screen. See, we're doing video right now, and there are people actually, while so far from the time we started our conversation to right now, there has been absolutely zero reason for anybody to look at the video. Zero reason. Other than to see what's on, behind Cliff's desk and, what kind of,
muscles.
Yeah, check out the muscles that Cliff's been building over the last 19 months. So we just mentioned that. Now, the people who are listening, do you have an audio version of this as well?
Yeah, we do. Yeah. So we do video because now we're producing something that's more visual for YouTube. We used to just post it on YouTube and just have like a black screen.
So one thing you want to be careful of as a content creator is trying to avoid mentioning Cliff's big muscle, because all of a sudden now I think of it this way. The audio, when you create audio and video, if there is at any place where you mention something that's happening in the video, the audio subscriber becomes a second-class citizen in your community. Because you're not giving your audio listener the full value of everything you have to offer with that piece of content. So keep that in mind. Mm-hmm. So guys, don't worry about it. My muscles aren't all that impressive. But so here's the deal though. When we think about an audio podcast, this is what I can tell you. Of those who subscribe to an audio podcast and listen to an audio podcast, the number of people who listen beyond the first 3 minutes, which is probably about 98% of all of your subscribers, if they make it past the first 3 minutes, if your show is an hour long, every single week, they listen to you for an hour every single week, week after week after week. 98% of the people who subscribe to your podcast listen to every syllable of every word spoken in your podcast every single week. Now, I don't know about you, but if I'm doing a podcast where I'm speaking an hour every single week into somebody's lives, that means I might even have more influence than some people spend talking to their spouses or their pastor at church or their employees or their employer or coworkers. If you really come down to it, if I'm a content creator and I'm communicating to my audience for an hour every single week, I am one of the single most influential people in each of those listeners' lives. That's an incredible amount of power that the podcast offers.
Absolutely. So to people starting out, I mean, a lot of people are sort of scared of doing these kind of things, doing the interviews and reaching out. And what do you have to say to people that want to get started in podcasting? So a lot of the things that you've been saying make sense, and now they want to get started. What do you say to them?
Well, I say get started. You have to actually think about the benefits, I believe, of podcasting. What benefits are there? And we've touched on like 3 of them, I think, in this interview. There are at least another 10 or 15 that I could think of. But the idea that any one of you can take any topic that you're passionate about and immediately create content without going to a radio station manager and getting approval. You don't have, here in the United States, you don't have to go to the FCC and get a license or pay a license. In fact, pretty much every single person hearing my voice or watching this video, almost every single person, I can't think of maybe 0.01% of you don't have a microphone that's built into a smartphone that you have. Any of you could get a free application on your phone and start speaking into the microphone on that and create podcast audio content. And technically, there are some free services out there that would allow you to take that audio file that you just recorded on the free application on your phone and turn around and put that into a podcast for you. Now, is there a little bit of a learning curve involved? Absolutely, there is. But I go by this motto. I don't need easy, I just need worth it. So as long as I know what the benefits are, then all of a sudden it's like, okay, is it worth it to create it? Well, gosh, based upon the things I just heard, absolutely, it sounds worth it. Now, let's figure it out. And so there's lots of free resources out there. When I started, I ended up spending $35 in podcast equipment, all right? And I had 16,000 subscribers within 3 weeks. All right, again, the 16,000 isn't anything I'm promising anyone. The average person starting a podcast today, you start out, you'll probably have your first 10 to 25 subscribers within the first couple of weeks. And depending on what you do to promote it and stuff like that, you might grow to a few hundred within a few months and potentially even get to your first 1,000 by the end of the first year. On average, that's what most people experience. Now, if you already have an online brand, social media presence, you've been doing some great things, adding value to a lot of people's lives, can you kickstart that and see a lot faster growth? Absolutely. But my suggestion, what do I say to those people who are thinking, I want to start? Here's what I want to tell you. There's a lot of people out there talking about podcasting. I've just talked about the fact that you've got the equipment already in your hand probably or in your pocket. There's opportunities for you to do it for free. But if you ever actually hear anybody tell you that podcasting is easy, they lied to you. And you will never hear those words come from me. Podcasting, creating a podcast is not easy. If it were easy, there'd be more than 275,000 podcasts out there. I guarantee you that. So podcasting is not easy, but it is worth it. Now, while podcasting is not easy, I will tell you this, and I say this with bold confidence. Podcasting is actually simple. It's a lot of work, and it's not easy. It's not something that's just gonna. It's like, oh, I'm just gonna do that, and it's 30 minutes of my time each week. No, it's hours of your time each week if you want to do it effectively. And starting it could be weeks of your time. Getting everything done in a way that would promote or would represent you well, especially if you want to do this for your business or something that you want to be taken seriously in. It could take you a couple weeks to get things up the way that you really want it, but it's definitely worth it. Did that answer your question? That's what I would say to those people.
And a lot of time, guys, you just got to go out there and take some action and see if it's for you. You just try it out. And if you enjoy it, what I enjoy is I enjoy meeting great people like yourself with insights and knowledge, and then share that with my community. That's what I enjoy with the podcast.
You bring that up, Erlend. That's another benefit that we hadn't talked about. I mean, think about this. Whatever area or interest that you have. Me, I got started, I was interested in the TV show Lost, right? What do you think the chances of me, just an average casual viewer, one of millions upon millions upon millions, what do you think the chances of me of ever talking to one of the celebrities, the TV stars of that show?
Well, next to zero.
Next to zero. All right? Having a podcast, being one of the top 6 actually being one of the only 6 podcasts out there, and having actually one of the top 3 of those 6. I reached out to a couple of the celebrities on the show. They called in, left voicemail feedback on my show. They listened to my show. They talked about my show on the official show. They talk about my show in the forums. They actually, even one of the writers, I am convinced, referenced my theory in the TV show itself. I am convinced they referenced the Thomas theory in the show as a result of the writers actually listening to my podcast and then actually throwing, kind of saying, yeah, right. But it was so fun. Now, I imagine that the writers and the actors of the TV show listening to my podcast. I'm having influence on the people creating the show. I'm a guy in Northern Kentucky. Come on. So that's pretty awesome. And the other thing is whatever the area of interest. Now, when I decided to go into this full time, I wanted to create a business. What am I doing? I don't know anything about running and owning a business or growing a business, selling products and services. So what do? I turn to podcasts out there on the subject. And I run into people like Pat Flynn, and I run into bloggers like, Pat Flynn was a blogger when I met him from smartpassiveincome.com. Dan Miller was an author of a book called 48 Days to the Work You Love. I heard about him from this guy on the radio called Dave Ramsey. And through Dan Miller, I hear about this guy named Michael Hyatt, who happens to have one of the most popular business blogs in the world. All right? Get this. Through the fact that I have a podcast, I asked these guys, hey, do you mind, can I interview you on my podcast? And they said, yeah, I'd love to be a guest on your podcast. And every single one of those names, those people are my close personal friends. I have every one of those names that I just gave you, and I could drop names of a ton of other people. I have all of them, I can send them a text message right now and get a response from any single one of those people because of the friendships that I've developed with the people who are the top of the industry that I'm most interested in. Now, if I did not have a podcast and I say, hey, I'm just this guy, I'm one of the millions of people who bought your book. Do you mind, can I buy you lunch, just out of the blue? With Dan Miller, I can tell you there's about a 1 in 1,000 chance that I would get a yes from that. All right, because I'm sure he gets about 1,000 requests for people to take him out to lunch every single year, and he says yes to a couple of them. Now, I can tell you this: if you have a podcast and you ask Dan Miller can you interview him, I would say 99 out of 100 people he's going to say yes to. That's what a podcast can offer. So yeah, that's just another benefit of a podcast.
Yeah, we've had some amazing people on this show, and having the pleasure to hang out with them for an hour, and it's been amazing.
I could actually see it to where if I had a podcast and I let's just say I had a podcast and it had 10 or 15 people that subscribed to it, and I'd been doing the show for 3 years, I'd be completely fine with an audience of 10 or 15 people if that show gave me the opportunity to talk to the people that I most respected in my industry.
So how can we get more momentum on this show, Hardcore MBA? So we're getting anything from we're getting at least 500 downloads and listens an episode, up to a couple of thousand. But of course, we'd like to see 100,000 episodes, those kind of numbers. What can we do?
Why would you like to see 100,000 people download the show?
Just more influence, more impact.
Okay, so more influence, more impact. What would you say if I could tell you that there's no way you would ever have more influence with 100,000 people if you don't actually see the opportunity you already have with the 500 people downloading your show right now?
Okay.
So here's what I want to tell you. How can you grow your audience? Here, what you can do is grow the relationship you have with your existing audience. So you have about 500 people. First thing, have you ever stood on a stage and spoke to a group of people where there are 500 people in the room?
Absolutely.
Okay, so you know what 500 people in a room looks like, right?
Yeah.
Okay, now imagine that room with 500 people are listening to you. They come to you every single week to hear everything you say. First of all, that's not only 500. That's 500 people who care about what you have to say. Now, how many of those 500 people do you know their first name, last name, email address, and at least 2 to 3 other personal details about their life?
I'm not sure about the metrics there.
Okay, so let's just put it this way. I want to encourage you to get to know 10% of them. So I'm not great at math. What is that? 500, 10% of that, is that 50 people?
Yeah.
What? Okay, so take 50 people. What I want to encourage you to do, create a spreadsheet and put in columns: first name, last name, email address, personal detail number 1, personal detail number 2, personal detail number 3. And now make it your goal to fill in all of those blocks for 50 people in your audience. All right? And if you can actually go to personal detail number 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10, the more personal details you have about that person, the more influence you can have in that person's life and in the lives of other people that you meet along the way. So here's what I want to say, Erlend. is, let's just say I get to know Bob Jones. All right. Bob Jones just left me a comment on my show notes for my podcast. And he writes, Cliff, thank you so much for episode number 452. This really made my day. I very much appreciate the work that you do. Sincerely, Bob. All right. Now, because he actually left a blog comment on my WordPress website, I also have his email address, Bob Jones email address. What do I not have about him? Any personal details. So here's what most podcasters do. Reply, Bob, thank you so much. It's an honor to know that you're out there listening to my show. I appreciate that you listen. Thank you for taking the time to leave me this encouraging feedback. I hope you have a great day. Cliff, send. Total wrong thing to do. Total wrong thing. Instead, Bob, wow. Can I just say it is quite an honor to know that you're out there listening to my podcast and to know that this message that I gave in this episode meant something to you personally. That means the world to me. Can you tell me what specifically did I say in this episode met a need that you're currently facing? Can you tell me more details? And if you'd prefer, you could either send that publicly here on the comments. We can continue it here. Or if you'd like to take it into a private conversation, my email address is cliff@podcastanswerman.com. I look forward to hearing from you soon. Now, Bob emails me, said, Cliff, okay, I'm so glad you gave me the opportunity to bring this privately because I didn't want to put it out in public. But man, I just lost my job. I had been doing this for so many years and I just got laid off. And not only that, but my wife is pregnant and we lost our health insurance. And not only is my wife pregnant, but we also have some complications with that pregnancy. And what you said in the podcast today, it really encouraged me. The faith that you have really inspired me to keep the faith and to trust that things are going to work out. I do see some opportunities where I'm going to go. I might have to move into another city, blah, 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 blah. Dude, did I just get detail number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8 about Bob Jones? Mm-hmm. You know what? Because I know about the details of Bob Jones, I also know the details about Sally Smith, and I've got all these other people that I know. You know what? I happen to know somebody who actually has an online firm that is looking for somebody who has your area of expertise. Have you ever thought about doing contracted work while you're looking for a new job, where you could actually work for multiple different people from your home, which would allow you to be there with your wife? If you'd like, give me some proposal. Let me do an email connection for you. Boom. Did I just add value to that person's life and to the life of the guy that I also knew his personal details is that he's looking for somebody to do this kind of work? I connect those two people. Guess what I have? 2 fans for life. You want to have more influence in the world, get to know the personal details about the 500 people who are listening to your show. Start with 50, move your way up to the 500. And here's what I can tell you. You start doing this and finding ways to take those personal details to meet the needs of all of those listeners who are currently listening to your show. Those people are going to be the marketing department for you and your brand.
Fantastic. So I've got 2 more fast questions before you have to go. Number 1 is, how do you make money on podcasting? Probably not a short answer, but we'll still try to fit it in. And number 2 is, where can we get more information about you? I know you're launching a podcast, how to learn podcasting program soon. Tell us a little bit about that as well. So first, revenue streams. Second, what are you launching and how can we help you out?
Okay, so first of all, how do you make money with podcasting? There's lots of ways to make money through podcasting, both directly and indirectly. I'm a huge fan of the indirect method, all right? And by direct method, by the way, is sponsorships, advertising, or even affiliate marketing. So I might actually do a review of a product on my show, and I have an arrangement where if somebody uses my discount code or if they go through a link that I have, that I earn a commission. That's an affiliate relationship. So there's affiliates, there's sponsors where even if nobody actually buys anything, my advertiser or sponsor is actually going to pay just for name recognition in my show. So I just mention their show or mention their brand, and based upon maybe the number of downloads or just an agreed amount of the value that I bring for name recognition, they're going to pay me a flat amount or a set amount depending on how many downloads I have. Those are a couple options. The biggest opportunities, though, are when you actually have a business and your podcast is not seen as your business, but as you actually have a business that has products and services, and you use the podcast to build relationships with people. And over the course of those people coming to know, like, and trust you, if they're in your target market, which obviously that's who you're trying to get as your audience, then those people, if you have products and services that sincerely meet the needs of your audience, then they come to know, like, and trust you. Why wouldn't they buy from you? And man, there's lots of opportunities. Now, what I want to encourage people to do is check out podcastanswerman.com/occupation. That is episode number 324 of my podcast. And it's called Podcasting as Your It's actually, the subtitle is How Long Before My Podcast Will Start Generating Income. I did an entire 1 hour on that topic. So again, that's podcastanswerman.com/occupation. And you also said, where can people find me? And you mentioned my course. I do have now I did say there's lots of opportunities to learn how to podcast for free. Just search for, do a Google search, how to podcast for free. There's lots of solutions absolutely free. And for those of you who aren't quite sure whether or not you want to get into podcasting, I encourage you, spend less than $50. Go out and try these free solutions. Even if you bloody your head against the wall figuring it out, that's fine. Don't worry about that. If it's just a hobby, try it out. Try a topic that means nothing to you except for it's just for joy, just for fun. That's how I got started. I started about a TV show. Now I have I've made multi-millions of dollars over the last 10 years in a business that started as a hobby originally. So you can do all kinds of great things. But what I would encourage you to do is first check out the free options that are out there. I have an old tutorial, and I don't not like to promote it a whole lot now because the free solution that I offered in 2010, that solution shut down because they didn't have enough funding. They got purchased by Twitter, and it shut down. But if you go to learnhowtopodcast.com, the mechanics are still the same of my method of how to learn how to podcast. And that's absolutely free. And currently, since 2010, I've not asked a single person to give me their email address. Over 80,000 people have used that tutorial to launch a podcast. So go check that out, learnhowtopodcast.com. But I do have a 4-week program called Podcasting A to Z. You get me as your personal coach for 4 weeks. All the details of that at podcastinga2z.com. It is a premium course, but you also get premium direct access to me as your coach for 4 weeks.
Fantastic. Cliff, it has been amazing. Thank you for sharing all your insights. I wish you a great day, and thanks for being on the show.
Erlend, thank you so much. It's been a great joy and opportunity to be in front of your audience. I highly value those 500 people, and boy, if I could get to know 50 of them, I would love to. So if any of them want to reach out to me and say, I heard you on Erlend's podcast, you can feel free to email me, cliff@podcastanswerman.com. I'd love to get to know about you guys. So God bless.
Fantastic, guys. If you enjoyed this episode, please share it in your social medias. I will catch you on the next episode. Thank you, and bye-bye.
This podcast is brought to you by MrOutsource.com. Outsourcing to the Philippines done for you. Mr. Outsource is a recruitment company matching busy entrepreneurs with Filipino virtual assistants, so you can have the time to focus on what's important.